Namaste. Welcome to our 50th talk on the Gita. Now, as I've said at the end of the previous talk, we can assume a personal relation toward God and sort of in the terms of what we like. So now Krishna is saying, and we're in the 29th verse of the ninth chapter, which is interesting because he says, those who worship me, they come to me, and so on. And naturally, we would think, all right, he's talking about people. Their goal is toward God, their interest is in God, their dedication is to God. Therefore, they are special people toward God. They are definitely special people, but their speciality is in how special they are as far as the general run of people in this world. And relation toward other people in this world, because those who are the Godwards, as Guru Nanak liked to call people, uh, of course, they're distinct. But now he says here in the 29th verse, I am the same to all beings, meaning his view to all beings. There is no one who is disliked or dear to me, in the sense of I like them better. This doesn't please us, and of course, in the phony bhakti movement of India, God is degraded to someone just like ourselves. Oh, he likes this food, he doesn't like that. You see, let's please him. Let's be close to God. Oh, and have such an intimate relation. And again, and they love uh, to have hallucinations where God says, in all the time and all the worlds, it is you who've understood me most, or it's you who truly have this relationship with me. That's just the ego talking, of course, and it is truly ungodly. But instead, let's go back again. I am the same to all beings. There is no one who is disliked or dear to me. By that he means I like that, I don't like that. He's the same to all beings because he is all beings. He's in all beings. Therefore, God sees us as his very own life, as we should see God as our very own life. So there's not a distinction when he says, I don't dislike or some are dear. He means it in that way. There's not this personal egoic thing. We always project ourselves even onto other people, and so we do it to God. And we want God to be an egotist like us, and God who can be bought even with repentance. Oh, I committed a sin. I'm so sorry, God. And God says, oh, no, don't cry, don't cry. God couldn't care less. But he also couldn't care more when you see it from the right positive side. But those who worship me with devotion are in me. You see? Are you in God or outside? Now, of course, actually, we're always in God. We can't get outside God. We wouldn't exist. But in the sense of functional living, those who are truly devoted to the true God, which is also their own self, they are therefore in God. They enter into God. They live and breathe and move in God, and I am also in them. There's an interesting story about someone who got so bored or tired of the fact that um, one member of their family was always just doing ritualistic worship day and night, doing this and that. thinking about it, and buying what would be needed for it and so on. And so he went to a saint and said, "Look, I wish you could come and shake this member of my family out of this obsession." So the saint went, and this man worshiped Krishna. And the saint went and observed the worship. And when it was over, then he said to the complainant, said to the saint, "Well, okay." The saint said, "You don't understand. You think he is worshiping Krishna, but I see Krishna is worshiping him. He is bowing down to him. Because we are in Krishna, Krishna is in us. So if God says so-called self-respect, he has the self-respect for you and I." This is an important thing to see also. If even an evildoer worships me single-heartedly, now he doesn't mean, and then he keeps on doing evil, but he keeps building temples, or he keeps doing worship in his home, or even hires a priest to come. No, no, no. It means if a person who has been an evildoer stops and worships God, he should be considered righteous, for truly he has rightly resolved. So he's wise. He's wiser than the people that live good lives and they help other people and so on, but they don't give God a second thought. That's deep dyed ignorance too. So those who say then, "I am going to God. I've been a fool before, but since I'm an eternal being, I've got the time ahead of me. From now on, I'm going upward." Therefore, in that moment, the person becomes good when he's right to resolve, because then he won't go back to his negative ways. Quickly, he becomes a virtuous soul. Why not? God is almighty. Well, if you really put your mind on God and you see God, in other words, japa and meditation, continual japa, meditation, this goes on even when reading a book, sitting, riding in a car, this goes on. That's why something like this is so valuable. It's a lifeline. Because when you're in the japa, you're in relationship with God. God is present to you, you're present to God. Those who practice find that out to be the truth. Quickly he becomes a virtuous soul and goes to everlasting peace. Now, quickly, does it mean in 5 hours? The chances are likely not, unless there are powerful samskaras from previous life. But consider we've been here for billions of years, trillions of years. Well, if it takes 80 years, it's quick. Understand, no devotee of mine is ever lost, as long as he keeps being a devotee. Now, there are people that pretend to be devotees, and then they slide away. I mean, I grew up with that in the religion I had. The people come, they start coming to church. They were there 3 times. They were, and then maybe then they were only there twice a week. They were only once a week. And then they were gone. You see, that's not a devotee. That is just someone going through a cycle produced by some scars and karma, which they use up, and then they're just back to where they were before. Truly, those who take refuge in me, even though they be from wicked origins, by that he means it's only good sense to pay attention to the antecedents of a person. Your ancestry means something, because the blood in your body is, in a sense, derived from your ancestors, or it comes down in a lineage. And usually it's so. When you see a person that no one in their family has ever thought of God, and you find out that their parents never thought of God, and their grandparents never thought of God, and their great grandparents never thought of God, it is not an impossibility that their religiosity will run out in about 3 to 4 months. And then they'll just be back to what for them is normal. And that's a wicked origin. In other words, a non godly origin. Well, they don't have to be criminals and evil people and killers. But therefore, the life of a saint in India never begins with so and so was born at such and such a time. No, it's his or her, his parents were like this about people. His grandparents were like this about people. His great grandparents were like this about people. For example, Yogaraj Shamachar Lahiri, who readers of the autobiography know him simply Lahiri Mahashai. He was a descendant of the great yogi sage Shandilya. There's even an Upanishad called the Shandilya. In fact, as we have the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, there are also the Yoga Sutras of Shandilya. So that's some ancestry. So when I went to India, I was lucky enough to be with very intelligent, conscious, and observant Sanatana Dharmis. And they were very diplomatic and very genteel, but they quizzed me in a very seemingly offhand and natural way about my parents, about my grandparents, and so on, you see. They did. I knew what they were doing because, by God's grace, I had the same mentality. And I understood it, you see. So, being an egotist, I would say, well, I had two grandmothers that worked miracles, especially one. She talked to God. God talked back to her. She did incredible healing. She did have the ability to raise the dead. My great grandfather was the spiritual father of an entire huge area where he was born. He wasn't just respected, he was revered. He had the ability to awaken spiritual consciousness, and he awakened both of my grandmothers. Personally, he did. And my great, you see, and my great, there was my one of my other great grandfathers. Every weekend, people flocked to him to learn about the Bible and what was meant in the Bible. He was literally kind of the Sunday school teacher of the whole countryside around him. And one of my great grandparents was considered a saint by living in the midst of people whose religion said everybody's a sinner and everybody ought to go to hell. You could be a sinner saved by grace, but not because you're worth anything. And I mean, they were really down on people. These are the Baptists. They're what they call hard shell Baptists, which means the toughest and the most impervious to God's mercy and love as people can be. And the whole countryside considered her the most godly person. And she was a great mystic. And actually, she died describing, as she was leaving her body, what she was seeing. My paternal grandfather did the same thing. He was able to be both out and in, and he described the whole spiritual process of death. So I told it to them, and then they figured, well, maybe he means it. At least I spent a lot of money to go to India. So truly, those who take refuge in me, even though they be from wicked origins, in other words, they don't have any family tree, they also attain the supreme goal. So it's okay for everybody. How much more easily then the holy Brahmins and devoted royal, that's the Kshatriya sages, because some of the greatest saints and spiritual teachers of India have not been Brahmins, they've been Kshatriyas, they've been kings or queens. I was actually just looking at that this morning. I went to a website in India and there was a description of one of the great queens of a few centuries ago and her tremendous example of Dharma that had been witnessed by the whole world around her. So, those who have also been devoted have come. And then he says, having come to this impermanent and unhappy world, you have to realize that's the truth. You're not going to hold on to the world. You're not going to have it forever. There are people that act like they live forever. In one sense, it's understandable because we are eternal. We can't die. So they never think of death because, well, they're not really going to die, but the body does die, and they need to have that understanding. But they just go on, go on, go on. One time, a man who was in his late 60s, uh, back in the early days of television, the television repairman was very necessary. Now we would think of such a thing. And because they had ways of getting out of adjustment and so on. And although he was quite elderly, he had trained and he was very good at fixing television. And we had a little bit of problem with our television set. And so he came out, terrible health, constantly and so on. But he came out and he worked on the set. He saw we had an organ. And he said to my father, play something for me. So my father, having the same ancestry I just described to you, he turned the organ on. He started playing a hymn. Man said, stop that stuff. You can save that for when I'm laid out. He was laid out in about 5 days. Sick, old, but not enough sense to understand that death would come. Yes, you see. So we have to understand it's impermanent. A bomb can drop and kill us all at any moment. Some lunatic decides America's a great Satan, so they decide to blow us up. Continents have sunk beneath, such as Atlantis, have sunk beneath the ocean. You go out on a highway, somebody's drunk, bam, there you are, you're gone. There is not even a guarantee that I will come to the end of this talk. That's the truth. It's impermanent. This thing can drop dead at any moment. People seem to be going fine and they're vigorous and they're active and so on. And then one day, literally, they go, they fall over. Then an autopsy said, oh, they've been deathly sick for maybe a year or so. So there's nothing you can count on. I remember I was so lucky, my beloved Aunt Faye, who was my real first spiritual teacher. She said, I thought my grandfather was so strong, and he died. I thought my father was strong, my mother was strong, and they died. And then I realized everybody's going to die on me. Who, who can I count on to not die? And I realized it was God. So from then on, I thought God stays father, mother, grandmother, grandfather, and everything to me. That was very wise, and I'm glad that I lived with such a person who told me that. Because she told me, you know, there's no assurance in your life, but if it's in God, then you'll never die. So having come to this impermanent and unhappy world, look at the misery, look at the suffering. You and I at the moment may not be suffering, but what we could suffer from some terrible disease within the next few hours, or everything can just fall apart around us. And what kind of a minimally minded person thinks, well, I don't care what's going on with other people in the world. I've got everything I want and it's just fine. We should realize how, right now, as I talk to you, people are dying throughout the world. Right now, throughout this world, people have learned something that has devastated them, and they're moved to the depths of their being, and they're grieving, and they're grieving, and they're grieving. People have been told, well, in 3 weeks, you're going to die. People have been told, I don't love you anymore. I don't want to have anything more to do with you. People are being told, sorry, you've lost your job. Or sorry, you've lost your investments. They all went flat. Throughout this world, people are in despair. How small minded to say, well, because it's not happening to me. Well, do I have to bother? You're a human being in this world. If it can happen to them, it can happen to you. People never do that. In fact, once someone said, the most amazing part about human beings is they see people dying around them all the time and they don't believe they will die. That's what we call moha, deep delusion. See? Devote yourself to me. And then you will live in a permanent world because that invisible, more real world is right here. Krishna Loka is here, Rama Loka is here, Deva Loka is here. So you can live and move with God as my grandmother did. And I mean that. After her death, I found records of her conversations with God. So it was. She was guileless. It was amazing. A lot of people thought she was stupid. She was very intelligent, but she was just utterly guileless. She was childlike, actually. And she even said, "Well, one time you know, I prayed. I thought, well, what is there with me?" And then what she saw, she looked up in the sky and saw this vision. I'll go through with it all, but it's really true. I remember, I think I've mentioned in a talk how in the church I went to, there was this elderly, frail little lady who literally shone with light. I mean it. And when she would come walking near you, you'd feel like what I would call divine fire. Was be enveloped in that when she came right up. It was wonderful. And oh, she was so incredible. I could forget my own face before I could ever forget that wonderful, wonderful soul. So it's possible to be like that. And a lot of people, of course, think they're crazy. But time, time tells. When they go beyond death, what's there? Are you a stranger? Or do they say, well, we know what you are? Yogananda said, be the kind of person when you die, the angels say, oh, here they come. Let's bid them welcome. Or that they say, oh, not one of those. Let's send them back as soon as we can. So it is. So then, there's just one more verse, though of course I'm 5 minutes over. With mind fixed on me, devoted, worshiping, bow down to me. Thus steadfast, with me as your supreme aim, you shall come to me. Now that's an assured future. That's it. That is real assurance. So, may we all, right now, make ourselves so steadfast that that will be inevitable when the end comes. I mean, consider me, I'm old. I'm 84 years old. I could die at any moment. So, fix your mind on the immortal, and you will manifest divine immortality. Namaste. Namaste.